Well, good news, folks. The Republicans stopped kicking themselves in the balls long enough to name a Speaker of the House. So finally, some good news for Republicans. Apparently, Republicans last night, they decided to stop kicking themselves directly in the nads. And instead, they decided to actually vote in favor of Mike Johnson. So Mike Johnson, somebody that I would say most of America had not heard of, like ever. He was only elected to Congress fairly recently. He hasn't been in Congress all that long. He is a congressman from Louisiana. According to Politico, his anonymity in Washington was the driving force in his election as Speaker because he hadn't made any enemies yet. He became the unlikely leader of an unruly group of House Republicans who will now rely on him to run their side of the Capitol. He was next to no one's first pick. But again, everybody else had a high profile, and that meant that he was the guy who kind of sneak in under the radar. Now Johnson must figure out how to achieve what McCarthy couldn't compromise that doesn't prompt a mutiny. Now, he's going to have an easier time with that. The reason he's going to have an easier time with that than McCarthy did is because he's not named Kevin McCarthy. Seriously, it's that simple. Matt Gaetz and a few of his crew decided they hated McCarthy. And so what that meant is that any compromise that McCarthy cut was going to be seen as treason by Gaetz and company and used as an excuse to get rid of McCarthy. Well, now Johnson is going to come in. He's going to do kind of exactly what McCarthy did because the incentive structure is precisely the same. So to take an example, McCarthy just cut a continuing resolution. He cut it with some Democrats. The reason he had to do that is because he had a better continuing resolution deal that was scuttled by Gaetz and company. Then, after McCarthy actually did the continuing resolution to fund the government, that's when he was ousted by Gaetz and company. Well, now, Mike Johnson's going to come in, and you know what he's proposing? Continuing resolutions. The same sort of stuff. Now, he can pass a bunch of single-issue bills, supposedly. He can pass the appropriations bills, do the process and all of that. But Democrats are going to reject it, and he's going to come back to doing continuing resolutions. Now, the thing is that because Gaetz ousted McCarthy and because Johnson is the new speaker, he has an incentive, Gaetz does, in making Johnson appear to be better than McCarthy, which means that he's not going to yell and scream about any deal that Johnson cuts. So inherently, Johnson has more leeway to cut deals and make deals than McCarthy did, mainly because all the people who would be incentivized to get rid of somebody for the publicity already did that. And so they can't do it again. They have to play this as though they achieved some sort of massive win by substituting Johnson for McCarthy. And again, the policy is going to come out almost exactly the same. It's going to be very, very, very similar. Now, the fact is that Johnson has a lot less experience than McCarthy in this space. Again, this is not a rip on Johnson. Johnson's great. I'm going to go through his opening speech in a second when he won the speakership, and it's excellent. It's really, really, really good. I happen to resonate to an enormous amount of what Johnson says. As a speaker, I think he's way more appealing than Kevin McCarthy was. However, the Speaker of the House's job is not just to be a person who speaks well and a person who communicates well. The Speaker of the House essentially has several jobs. One is to, speak well and maintain policy positions. But the kind of bigger aspects are vote counting, vote whipping, rewarding allies and punishing enemies, getting together your coalition, actually do things. And that requires a lot of back scratching. It requires a lot of maneuvering. It requires the kind of Machiavellian stuff that McCarthy was actually pretty good at. I don't know if Johnson has a lot of experience at it. Maybe he's great at it. We don't know. He's never done it before. The speaker also is supposed to fundraise for pretty much all the Republicans across the board. So McCarthy, over the course of his time in House leadership, raised almost $500 million for various House Republican candidates, including many of the same people who then ousted him. Mike Johnson in the last election cycle, you wouldn't expect him to raise tens of millions of dollars. He's one guy running in an uncontested district in Louisiana. Mike Johnson in his last election cycle raised $1.3 million. So can he translate that over into raising hundreds of millions of dollars for fellow candidates? McCarthy, when recruited a bunch of candidates in purple districts, Johnson hasn't really done that yet. So again, he's going to have to prove that he can do all of the hard-nosed things that McCarthy could do. And there's a lot of parliamentary procedure to being Speaker of the House. It's not like anybody can just walk in the front door and suddenly transform the place. If you don't file a bill at the proper time, Democrats could sneak in. They could flip the bill. Like there really are a lot of procedural complexities. Now, Johnson may very well be able to handle it. We just don't know. Okay, so the notion that things are going to radically change in the House now that it's Johnson as opposed to McCarthy is really silly. Now, again, none of that's a rip on Johnson. It is a rip on Gaetz and team. The idea that the Gaetz and team achieved some sort of massive material victory by throwing the House into full-on chaos for 3 weeks and demonstrating the fractiousness and idiocy of part of the Republican caucus, I don't buy it. I don't see it. And that is without reference to what happens going forward with Johnson. And so here are a few things about Mike Johnson that are kind of awesome. So Mike Johnson, very, very socially conservative. He has a 90% lifetime rating from Heritage Action, 92% from the American Conservative Union. He is very much in favor of cutting spending, which is something, by the way, a lot of the MAGA type are not really big in favor of. They kind of like the spending, depending on who they are. He's very strong on abortion, extremely pro-life. He has an A+ rating from the Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America group. He used to work as a senior legal counsel for the Alliance Defense Fund. And he is anti-same-sex marriage, for example. He has been historically, which, by the way, is the historically correct position of the Republican Party, that a man and a woman are marriage, and that any other form of human relationship is not the same morally or sociologically. He was involved in the attempts to stall certification of the election post-2020. And this is being used as a club by Democrats already. He devised an argument that was actually the only good argument that was made in the aftermath of November 7th, which is essentially that a lot of states like Pennsylvania had unilaterally shifted their voting laws so as to benefit Democrats in ways that were illegal. That was like the only good legal argument that was made during that entire spectacle. Johnson was the one making those arguments. And he said some stuff during that time that, frankly, is ridiculous. Right? He called into question the voting systems and cited Venezuela, and it was Sidney Powell kind of stuff. But he is now moving away from that. I assume that he's going to ignore all of that. Pure Talk recently announced they would alleviate $10 million in veteran debt by Veterans Day. Thanks to your support, they are 53% of that goal with 2 weeks to go. Think about this. The U.S. military is made up of 100% volunteers. These are men and women who are willingly sacrificing everything they have for this country. When they're done serving, they return home to a tight job market, outrageous living expenses. This is why I'm so happy a private company like Pure Talk has jumped in to help. When you switch to Pure Talk's lightning fast 5G network, they'll donate a portion of every new order to this noble cause. You can make a real difference just by choosing superior cell phone service. Pure Talk's plans start at just $20 a month. They offer unlimited talk, text, more data, and a mobile hotspot. I use Pure Talk coverage for all of my calls. You should do the same. Just go to puretalk.com/Shapiro. Make that switch. Great tower network. Again, excellent coverage. You're paying less money and you're helping out veterans. Let's rally together and show unwavering support for our own veterans. Visit puretalk.com/Shapiro. Switch to Pure Talk today. It's the right move. It's the American way. Visit puretalk.com/Shapiro today. Again, that's puretalk.com/Shapiro. Their plans start at just $20 a month. So go check them out right now. You'll be helping out yourself and you'll also be helping out American veterans. puretalk.com/Shapiro to make the switch. Bon Charge is a holistic wellness brand with a huge range of evidence-based products to optimize your life in every way. Their products help you sleep better, perform better, recover faster, reduce inflammation, and so much more. From blue light glasses to red light therapy, Bon Charge products help you naturally address the issues of our modern day way of life effortlessly and with maximum impact. If you haven't checked out their infrared sauna blanket, you need to. The infrared sauna blanket has all kinds of benefits. I've tried it myself. It's awesome. It works by using infrared light, which heats the body rather than the air around you like a traditional sauna, which means you get the same benefits at a lower heat. Sweating helps flush out the toxins, makes you feel better, raises your heart rate to that of physical exercise so you can even burn some calories while you relax. Bon Charge ships worldwide. It offers exceptional customer service, comes with a 12-month warranty, so you really have nothing to lose. Go to boncharge.com/Ben. Use code Ben. Save 15% today. That's BONCHARGE.com/Ben. Use code Ben. Save 15% today. When it comes to that infrared sauna blanket, basically it's all the benefits of sauna without having to sit sweaty and unclothed in a weird room with some dudes. Instead, you can put that blanket on, get the sauna on. It's great. Go to boncharge.com/Ben. Use code Ben to save 15%. Johnson gave a really quite beautiful speech last night on becoming Speaker of the House. He opened by thanking Kevin McCarthy.
I want to express my great thanks for our Speaker Emeritus, Kevin McCarthy. Kevin has dedicated over 2 decades of his life to selfless public service, 16 of those years in this House. And you would be hard-pressed to find anybody who loves this institution more or has contributed more to it. He is the reason we're in this majority today.
So he started off with that. He then moved on to the fact that it's time to get back to work, which of course is true. This has not been a good moment for the Republican Party. They look like clowns. So restoring some sort of semblance of dignity to the Republican caucus would certainly be a plus.
I want to say to the American people, on behalf of all of us here, we hear you. We know the challenges you're facing. We know that there's a lot going on in our country, domestically and abroad, and we are ready to get to work again to solve those problems, and we will. Our mission here is to serve you well, to restore the people's faith in this House, in this great and essential institution.
He continued along these lines. He said that the pride in the institution is in jeopardy, and it's time to restore that pride. That, of course, is true as well.
And I think all of our parents are proud of what we're called to do here. I think all the American people at one time had great pride in this institution, but right now, that's in jeopardy. And we have a challenge before us right now to rebuild and restore that trust.
Okay. He's, of course, right about that as well. Now, on principle, he's a very strong traditional conservative. He's pretty hawkish on foreign policy. He voted against some of the Ukraine appropriations bills. That would probably be the biggest distinction between him and McCarthy, is that McCarthy was pro-funding for Ukraine. And in the initial response, Mike Johnson was pro-funding of Ukraine. And then after we gave them like $100 billion, then he started to get skittish about it. And he suggested he is not in favor of that. But that's also where the Republican caucus is. The possibility of passing large-scale Ukraine funding on a standalone basis was a non-starter inside the caucus. Anyway, that's obviously the direction that the Republican Party has moved. So Mike Johnson, again, his speech last night was excellent. When he got to his principles, this is particularly good. So Mike Johnson ticked off a lot of the left last night when before he assumed his speakership position, he actually knelt in prayer with a bunch of other members of the Republican caucus. And this, of course, is very bad. We're not supposed to do this. It's super offensive to, pay tribute to God after you achieve something of the magnitude of becoming Speaker of the House in the United States of America. That, of course, is deeply offensive, deeply problematic, clearly. I mean, being Rashida Tlaib and being an actual terror supporter, okay, according to Democrats. Kneeling for prayer on the floor of the House, that, of course, is a huge problem. You're allowed to kneel in kente cloth for George Floyd. You're just not allowed to do it for God without the kente cloth. In any case, Mike Johnson, he said last night that it's time to reject atheism and Marxism.
In 1962, that our national motto, "In God We Trust," was adorned above this rostrum. And if you look at the little guide that they give tourists and constituents who come and visit the house, if you turn in there to about page 14 in the middle of that guide, it tells you the history of this. And it says very simply, these words were placed here above us. This motto was placed here as a rebuke of the Cold War era philosophy of the Soviet Union. That philosophy was Marxism and communism.
So obviously, he is slapping at some members of the left. Then he listed what he called the 7 core principles of conservatism. These are pretty traditional.
I think it's really quintessentially the core principles of our nation. I boil them down to individual freedom, limited government, the rule of law, peace through strength, fiscal responsibility, free markets, and human dignity. Those are the foundations that made us the extraordinary nation that we are. And you and I today are the stewards of those principles.
Okay, that sounds pretty traditionally conservative to me. I mean, in there I heard, peace through strength, which is something that a lot of people are not big fans of these days. I heard fiscal responsibility, something a lot of people on the right are not big fans of these days. So again, the idea that he's some sort of like wild departure from traditional conservatism is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. He's a traditional conservative, which is good. A traditionally conservative Speaker of the House would be a very good thing. I hope that he pulls the levers in a more conservative direction than House leadership has been able to do. I also understand, as I've said, the incentive structure. And the incentive structure means he has a Democrat Senate, he has a Democrat President of the United States, and he has an extremely thin majority in the House. And all it takes is a few grandstanders to make it so that he has to cut a deal with Democrats again. In the initial run, I expect that he's going to get the support of many of the people who ousted McCarthy, so those aren't going to be the people who buck him. But as time progresses, he'll have the exact same incentive structure as everyone else. So was this like a big, giant win for the Republican Party? Again, really like Mike, like in a ton of ways, love Mike Johnson. Love him on foreign policy, love him on, again, across the board, excellent choice for Speaker of the House. Can he pull the levers in a sophisticated way? We have yet to see that. Was this like overall an amazing move for Republicans, like a much needed Let's hold our fire on that one. Was Matt Gaetz a strategic genius for throwing the House into complete chaos for a month to do this? No, he was not. And any attempts to retcon that are pretty ridiculous. Well, regardless of what the Democrats are saying, Johnson's first move was a good move. He announced last night that the very first move that he was going to make as Speaker of the House was to push a resolution to support Israel and then a bill to support Israel in its war against Hamas. Here is what he had to say.
The first bill that I'm going to bring to this floor in just a little while will be in support of our dear friend Israel, and we're overdue in getting that done. We're going to show not only Israel, but the entire world that the barbarism of Hamas that we have all seen play out on our television screens is wretched and wrong, and we are going to stand for the good in that conflict.
Okay, good for Johnson. He's very strong on that particular issue. That resolution did pass last night, 412 to 10. The nay votes were, except for Thomas Massey, who basically just doesn't like government spending on anything, which, okay. The other 9 nay votes were exactly who you would think they were. Jamal Bowman, Cory Bush, Andre Carson, Al Green, Summer Lee, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Delia Ramirez, Rashida Tlaib. And there were 6 present votes as well. Again, more radicals, Ayanna Pressley, Greg Kasar of Texas, Joaquin Castro, Chuy Garcia, Pramila Jayapal, Nydia Velasquez. Exactly who you would assume it to be. So, again, I think that it's good to get the House back in working order. Good for Mike Johnson, and it's time for the House to get back to work. Are you tired of the lies and the twists of the mainstream media talking points? Yeah, me too. Join me in my newest series, Fact, where I dismantle and bring truth to this tiring mainstream agenda.